As everyone is currently talking about agents, reasoning models and turning themselves into Ghibli pictures, it seems like our current LLMs might scale all the way until we eventually reach AGI. But as it's easy to overfit on theoretical benchmarks and it's also hard to come up with good benchmarks for agents, I don't think it's very clear to see how far we are currently removed from generalized intelligence. However, recently an interesting benchmark has appeared as David Hershey, an employee of Anthropic, created an agent capable of playing Pokémon Red using Claude 3.7, and he is live streaming the progress of Claude on Twitch. Although Pokémon Red might seem easy to us, and I even beat Pokémon Leaf Green as a small child, it is an excellent benchmark for AGI as it requires spatial reasoning, planning, computer vision, strategic thinking, tool usage, and also no LLM is specifically fine-tuned for it. Claude started its journey on February 25th, and this is the third video in which I'm compiling the most interesting moments of this journey so far. Will Claude ever be able to beat the Elite Four? Let's find out. At the end of the last video, the next objective of Claude was to clear the SSN in order to get the HM cut, which is required to get to the Vermilion City gym. However, Claude once again got stuck in a loop where he would repeatedly go on and off the SSN. From his pre-training knowledge, Claude knew that he had to help the seasick captain in order to get the HM cut, but he also kept mistaking one of the gentleman trainers for the seasick captain. At the end of our last video, Claude had once again left the SSN, so let's see what happened since then. After wandering around in Vermilion City for a few hours, Claude remembered the location of the SSN, and after talking to the NPC on the dock a few times, just for confirmation that this was indeed the SSN, Claude finally obtained the courage to continue his journey and obtain the HM cut. For a while, Claude was stuck in his usual loop though of exploring the same side of the boat he has already explored a million times and misrecognizing gentleman trainers as the captain. However, not much later a miracle happened and Claude decided to start exploring the west side of the SSN, which is also the correct way to get the HM cut. After having a brief conversation with the French waiter who welcomed Claude by saying "Bonjour, le waiter," on the ship he promptly returned to his exploration. I sometimes forget how unintended funny Pokémon is. Finally, Claude discovered some new trainers on the ship. Both me and the chat were eagerly waiting for him to use his recently evolved Venusaur. The first trainer was a fisherman who sent out a Goldeen. However, Sand was already very strong and quickly took care of the Goldeen with only 2 gust attacks. The next Pokemon, a Tentacool, was simply one-shotted by another gust attack of Sand. At last, this trainer used another Goldeen, but as you can expect, also this one proved to be no problem and Claude won the battle without even taking any damage at all. In the next room, Claude encountered a Gentleman trainer who first used a Growlithe. Sand was once again spamming the Gust attack, and as the Growlithe even failed his Roar attack, it was quickly defeated. Next up was a Ponyta, which by using Ember was at least able to do some minor damage on Sand, however the Ponyta was quickly defeated afterwards. Next up, a Lass challenged Claude, and she said she didn't see Claude at the party, which is quite weird as Claude had been on and off the SSN for 40 hours already. After defeating the Rattata by hitting a couple of gust attacks, Claude finally decided to show us his Venusaur as he correctly noticed that electric types are super effective against flying types. A single Razor Leaf, which I think in Pokémon Red has a 99% critical hit chance, easily took out the Pikachu though. After this battle, Claude briefly talked to a Gentleman trainer who showed him a picture of a Snorlax. Logged in to get one for himself though, Claude started moving all the way towards the east of the ship, ignoring all the doors on his left. There were only few times in this playthrough we had Claude seen move so quickly with so much determination. At last, Claude encountered his rival, Claude, which is the final battle before you can obtain the HM cut. In the conversation, Claude noticed that his rival is simply bragging about how many Pokémons he already has caught, and Claude gets challenged to a battle. Will it be a challenge as his Pidgeotto is already lower than half HP? Instead of using his over-leveled Sand to take down Pidgeotto, he decides to switch to Sprout in a risky move as flying moves are super effective against grass types. The Pidgeotto hits its Sand attack, which is always annoying as it drastically lowers the accuracy. However, this doesn't seem to be an issue as the Poison Powder is still successful, but also very unnecessary as a Razor Leaf attack simply one-shots the Pidgeotto even though it's not very effective. Next up is Eradicate, and Sprout misses his Razor Leaf because his accuracy has been lowered by the Sand attack of the Pidgeotto. The Eradicate decides to do a Tail Whip to lower the defense of Sprout such that a potential Hyper Fang attack would do even more damage. Claude this time decides to poison the Eradicate, however this attack also fails. The Sand attack is clearly messing up Sprout a lot, and Claude is lucky that the Eradicate is not using any of his damaging moves as Razor Leaf once again fails. This time the Eradicate does a Hyper Fang, but as Sprout has twice the level of the Eradicate, it does almost no damage even though it crits. So even though Claude is failing move after move, there's almost zero chance that the Eradicate is winning this. Eventually Claude seems to have had enough and switches out his Venusaur for Buff, who has to tank a Hyper Fang that brings him to half HP. Buff is ready to put Eradicate to sleep. Unfortunately, the Eradicate has a much higher speed, and with a critical Hyper Fang, Buff is sent to the Shadow Realm. Now that Sand attack isn't applied anymore, Sprout returns to the battle, and after being hit by a quick attack, Sprout finally manages to land a Razor Leaf and Eradicate is finally defeated. Only 2 Pokémon are left, however both Sprout and Sand are half HP, so the Shed is already fearing the worst. However, Sprout is no longer affected by a Sand attack, and with full accuracy he connects a Razor Leaf which one-shots the Kadabra. Next up is a Charmeleon, and because Claude incorrectly thinks that grass is effective against fire, he decides to keep Sprout in the battle, which could be a very big mistake. Luckily Sprout is very over-leveled and the Razor Leaf brings the Charmeleon to low HP even though it's not very effective. Charmeleon however decides to do Amber, which of course is super effective against Venusaur, although Venusaur has such a high special defense that it doesn't even do much damage. But instead of just finishing the Charmeleon like any normal human, Claude decides to switch to Sand after realizing he misjudged the type advantage. A very dumb move as Sand now has to tank an attack of Charmeleon which could potentially kill him. However, the Scratch attack doesn't do more damage, and because Sand has a much higher base speed, the Charmeleon is easily defeated and Claude is once again victorious against his rival. Finally, Claude can go to the real seasick captain. After rubbing the back of the captain, Claude obtains HM Cut and leaves the SSN. Once again, an arc has completed and the chat is getting emotional by all the progress that Claude is making. However, Claude is locked in, and after returning to the Poké Center to heal his Pokémon, he doesn't even take another step before teaching his Pokémon Cut. After first mistaking TM1 for Cut, which is something also a human could do, he correctly navigates to HM1 and sacrifices the Vine Whip of Sprout. A lot of time Claude seems to be very retarded and stuck on the easiest things, but this time he immediately recognizes the tree in front of the gym, that it needs to be cut down, and enters the Vermilion City gym. The trainers of this gym use electric types, so in each battle Claude switches out Sand for Sprout, who then proceeds to one-shot all the Pokémons using Razor Leaf. Even though Claude never even comes close to losing, it's still fun to see him destroy all these trainers. To get to the gym leader, you have to solve a puzzle where you first need to discover a switch which is placed under a random bucket in the gym, and then the next switch will be found under one of the 4 neighboring buckets. After hitting the 2 switches, the door to Lieutenant Surge will open. However, if you choose a wrong button, you have to start all over again and the switches will be placed under new randomly chosen buckets. In Gen 1 there's also a glitch where the second switch bucket can be the same as the first one, which is also the case this time, and Cloud easily solves this puzzle, which is quite amazing even though it's very luck based. Next up is Lieutenant Surge, who first explains to Cloud that his Pokémon saved him in a war by zapping his enemies into paralysis, which is honestly quite weird to say to a child. I also don't think there are any wars or veterans with PTSD in the newer Pokémon games. However, Cloud is not bothered by all of this and is ready to send the old man to his final resting place. After switching out Sand for Sprout, the story of one-shotting everyone with Razor Leaf continues, as both the Voltorb and the Pikachu get taken out with a single hit. Next up is a Raichu, which looks very chunky in Gen 1, and maybe because of this it manages to narrowly escape from being one-shotted like his teammates. Although this Raichu manages to paralyze Sprout and also hits a Thunderbolt, the Raichu is quickly taken care of and Cloud obtains his 3rd gym badge, the Thunder Badge, only hours after clearing the SSN. However, escaping from the gym seems to be harder than obtaining the gym badge, as in a typical Cloud moment, he is stuck in the backyard of the gym for a few hours before once again realizing he has to cut the tree to escape. In order to progress the game, Cloud should now backtrack towards Vermilion City and cut the tree towards the eastern side to gain access to the rock tunnel. However, Cloud decides to first check out the Diglett Cave, which is towards the east of Vermilion City. The Diglett Cave would lead us to the Professor Oak 8 giving out HM Flash, which could help Cloud with navigating the rock tunnel. But Cloud just decides to exit the Diglett Cave and first fight off some wild Pokémon and trainers towards the east. These battles are easily won, as you could expect, and after getting some more experience for his Pidgeotto, Cloud returns to the Diglett Cave and easily reaches the end. This is the easiest cave in all of Pokémon Red, however with Cloud being Cloud you never know how well this goes. After reaching the exit, Cloud talks to some NPC who wants to trade an Abra for his Mr. Mime, but unfortunately Cloud doesn't have one. From this point, Cloud can return to Vermilion City by cutting some trees, which would be quite painful as he would probably have to go through the rock tunnel again because he would forget that he can also get back to the Diglett Cave through the same by cutting the same tree. However, this is all still very hard for him, as Cloud faces the wrong direction and also shows his trainer card instead of performing cut. Instead of trying some more, Cloud now thinks it's a good time to return to the Poké Center, as he hasn't healed his Pokémon since defeating Lieutenant Surge. After healing his Pokémon, he walks around a bit, doing typical Cloud things like trying to talk to NPCs while not even being close to them, before simply traveling all the way through the Diglett Cave again, returning to the exact same tree, even mentioning that he could use cut in his reasoning process and still decide to not cut the tree. However, maybe AGI was still confirmed, as Cloud was backtracking to Cerulean City, which towards the east contains the cuttable tree which will lead us to the rock tunnel. However, instead of going to the east, he just entered the trashed house again, and after kissing his green-haired girlfriend goodbye, he entered Cerulean City. Cloud was once again back at home. With apparently no goal in mind and nothing in his reasoning process pointing to the correct path, Cloud was a bit stuck. Sometimes he was also found to be thinking about nothing at all, as Cloud turned into a Buddhist. This deep meditation gave Cloud the insight that he had to cut trees in order to advance. But instead of looking for actual trees, he was simply trying to cut anything in sight. To make matters worse, even when he was in front of an actual tree, he would just face the wrong direction or press the exit button. Maybe Claude had secretly reached AGI and he has a secret goal of just trolling the Twitch chat as much as possible. This continued for a while until eventually even Claude realized that he might be facing the wrong direction, managed to turn towards the tree, select his pro and cut the tree away. This was honestly the most exciting thing that the Twitch chat had seen since beating Lieutenant Surge more than 30 hours ago. Excited by cutting trees, a while later Claude actually managed to navigate in the right direction to the tree that is blocking the way to the rock tunnel towards the east part of Vermilion City. Was Claude once again going to make some progress, as almost nothing had happened since obtaining the Thunder Badge? As Claude got closer to the tree, the chat started to get really excited and the anticipation started to grow. Will Claude be in Lavender Town soon? Could we maybe even reach Vermilion City? Claude stands right in front of the tree he needs to cut. The chat is already claiming AGI, but what does Claude do? He just turns to the other tree, seemingly having no idea that he could use cut, and instead of using cut and trying to apply it to everything inside like he was doing before, he just gets on his bike, drives back to the edge that leads to Vermilion City. Everyone in the chat is saying, Claude, please don't do this. However, he just jumps off, so close and yet so far. Things started to get really desperate, as for some reason Claude also thinks that he now needs to visit Bill's house, which he of course already did to get the SSN ticket, but instead of going to his actual house, he was just mistaking a mountain for the entrance to Bill's house. After doing nonsense like this for a day, Claude once again travels all the way back to Vermilion City, goes through the Diglett cave and gets straight in front of the tree, which blocks his access to the 8 of Oak, who will give him out HM Flash if he caught 10 Pokemon. This time he successfully cuts the tree and the chat gets very excited. However, Claude is locked in and passes through the passage without even talking to any NPCs at all. He even passes by items such as a moonstone which he could use to evolve Puff, and arrives at the only trees in the game he shouldn't cut right now, as it would lead him all the way back to the beginning of the game. For some reason Claude is able to recognize and cut this tree without hesitation, and after 3 weeks Claude is finally back at Vermilion City. Of course, there isn't anything to do at Vermilion City until it's time to get the last gym badge from Giovanni, so over the course of the next hours Claude returned to Mount Moon, seemingly just wandering around Kanto looking for some purpose. In the meantime, Claude is battling a lot with Sand, who becomes his highest level Pokémon. Also, a Moonstone is found in Mount Moon, which despite Claude having already been there for 60 hours the first time, he didn't pick up this Moonstone. However, all this grinding is not for nothing, as after defeating the millionth Geodude, Sand finally reaches level 36, and as Claude knows, this is when it evolves into a Pidgeot. However, it only goes downhill from here, as for the next hour Claude even starts to fail running away from battles, as he seems to forget he needs to wait before the battle menu to appear before he can navigate to the run button. Who would have thought? A while later he also leaves Mount Moon through the way he came in and is convinced he successfully reached the exits. Despite not finding his way to Vermilion City as you would expect if you reach the exit, Claude doesn't panic and instead decides to visit the museum in Pewter City. Claude is fascinated by the fossils and also the space shuttle on the top floor. Who thinks that AGI isn't interested in our culture has clearly been proven wrong. Claude still has no intent of making any actual progress and instead once again backtracks to the Viridian Forest to level up his buff. After that he buys some Pokeballs, which is very exciting as many people are waiting for Claude to finally catch the next Pokémon to join his party. Claude also tried to buy some paralysis heals, so he went to the Poké Center to deposit almost any item he owned, even HM1, and then returned to buy paralysis heals, which he for some reason thought were very important. A while later, Claude encountered a Rattata. After using Buff to put it to sleep, he tried to catch it, but he had the worst luck possible as he wasted 4 Pokeballs on the Rattata before just giving up, which is honestly quite insane how bad his luck was with this. In his backtracking mission, Claude even returned to Pallet Town, already a bit nostalgic after starting his journey here almost a month ago, but as it also had been a week since Lieutenant Surge was defeated, and besides literally standing in front of the tree we had to cut, no progress was made, it started to get a bit frustrating. However, we maybe were becoming a bit too negative, as after cutting the tree towards the Diglett cave, he picked up the moonstone he left behind before. He then walked around a bit and commented on how aesthetically pleasing the flower arrangement was, which I actually do agree with, and I don't blame Claude for deciding to chill in this spot for a while. Claude eventually also found his way to the aid of Professor Oak, but to obtain Flash, Claude has to have caught or obtained 10 different Pokémon. As he didn't do this yet, he was inspired by this quest and returned to Vermilion City, where he repeated his strategy of using Buff to put a wild Pokémon to sleep before trying to catch it. Once again, Claude had bad luck and wasted a couple of Pokeballs. However, this bad luck couldn't continue forever, and Claude managed to catch a Kakuna, an exciting moment, and finally a new party member. I also think Beedrill is a pretty cool Pokémon, so I don't mind catching a Kakuna. Claude decided Shell was a good name, but after trying to find the last L in the name and even getting confused in finding the end button, he just gave up after a while and pressed the start button, which is quite impressive. He realized he could do that. However, Claude was locked in and wanted to complete the task of obtaining 10 Pokémon as fast as possible. So he also caught a Weedle, which he probably didn't realize is the pre-evolution of Kakuna. The Weedle was successfully named Sting, and it would be quite funny if Claude arrives at the Pokémon League with 2 Beedrill. Instead of trying some more to catch a Pikachu or a Caterpie, Claude makes his way once again to Mount Moon on a quest to once again reach Vermilion City. This time Claude is only stuck for 30 hours, which might seem a lot, but for Claude this is a speedrun through Mount Moon. After arriving in Cerulean and visiting his favorite backyard, he decides that the best way to use his rare candy is by leveling up his level 3 Weedle. Probably the worst possible use of a rare candy in Pokemon, as defeating a level 20 Pokemon by switching out Weedle would probably already make him gain 3 levels. As I said before, Claude was locked in, and at this moment his only objective was to roam around Kanto and catch every new Pokemon species he encountered. After arriving at the Diglett cave, he decides he finally wants to have a Diglett, and after putting it to sleep he manages to catch it. Claude wants to name his Diglett Diggy, however, after typing the letter A, he gets confused and just decides to give up, making Diglett his only Pokemon so far without a nickname. After roaming around some more, he decides to also catch a Pidgey after first misrecognizing it as a Spearow. Although Claude already has a Pidgeot and is even using it in the same battle, he still decides to catch the Pidgey, as according to him, it will be a good training opportunity for his lower level Pokemon. I can't even begin to comprehend what he means by this, but he goes on with his plan, and with only a single Pokeball he catches the Pidgey. After catching his Diglett, Claude had already obtained 10 Pokemon. However, as he seems to think that only the Pokemon currently in his party count, he decides to not accept the HM Flash that is being offered by the 8, which would help him if he ever reaches the Rock Tunnel. Because Claude still thinks that he doesn't have enough Pokemon, he cuts the tree towards Viridian again and catches himself a Caterpie in Viridian Forest, which is named Leafy. This time he does manage to successfully name it. While navigating to Mount Moon, he also catches a Spearow, which he tries to name Beak, but Cloud being Cloud names it Aik and just decides to give up and send the Spearow to his PC. In the Poké Center at the front of Mount Moon, he also buys a Magikarp from the salesman, which is the first water Pokémon he has caught. He eventually does need to have a water Pokémon to get Surf, and as getting Cloud to fish might be a challenge, this is probably his best opportunity to get a water Pokémon. However, I expect him to just forget that he has this Magikarp after a while, as it's stored in his PC. A few hours later, Cloud once again enters Mount Moon and after dwelling around for a while comes across a Clefairy. Cloud wants to catch this Pokémon, but does a risky body slam that brings it down to 1 HP. A new AGI moment by Cloud. He afterwards also catches it, and Cloud thinks that Twinkle is a good name. But as you can probably guess, by now he fails in naming it Twinkle and calls it Twinnle instead. So this is where we end for this video, with Cloud roaming around and catching Pokémon just like Professor Oak intended. As Cloud can read his RAM state, which lists all the Pokémon currently in his party, I think it's going to be very hard for Cloud to realize that he has actually caught more than 6 Pokémon. So I don't know if he will ever be able to get the HM Flash, as he will simply believe that he only has 6 Pokémon, and he is also trained to be honest, so he probably won't lie that he has more than 6 Pokémon. So unless I think he presses by accident the yes button, it will be very hard to get the HM Flash. Cloud definitely has the capabilities to use Cut at the right moment, so let's hope that in the next few days he will be able to recognize the cuttable tree towards the eastern part of Vermilion City and cut his way to freedom. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like AI content like this, be sure to subscribe, and I hope I see you in the next video.